Hello, this is lecture number 11 now. We're going to try to wrap up this area of, evolutionary psychology, and Darwinian theory, and natural selection. Very important part of the field of behavioral neuroscience today. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what I would call misconceptions about evolution. So let's begin this by talking about some of these I think common misconceptions. And one that I think you hear very frequently is that humans now have stopped evolving. That there are no additional changes that can occur by way of natural selection. Well, we have not stopped evolving, not by any way, shape, or form have we stopped evolving. The key to evolution really is not survival, but it's reproduction. It's producing healthy children. So we must continue to evolve and to change in order to serve that particular function of being able to reproduce, of being able to advance in terms of the human population. And indeed, that involves natural selection in order to continue to be able to produce healthy children and to respond to all of these environmental changes that potentially can occur down the road. There must be very significant adaptation to that. So natural selection continues to work. We have not stopped evolving. Another common misconception about evolution is this whole idea that evolution means improvement. That decidedly is not the case. Here's what evolution does. It improves our fitness. It improves our ability to pass on genes to the future generation. And indeed, it may be that some of those changes actually put us at a disadvantage, put future generations at a disadvantage. So again, evolution is going to improve fitness. It's going to improve our ability to continue to reproduce in the particular environment that we're in. So again, passing on genes to future generations might be there might be disadvantages to those evolutionary changes that occur. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will benefit us. They may be a disadvantage down the road for future generations. Another misconception is that evolution benefits the individual, that it benefits the species. What we know is that it benefits their genes. So it's not really benefiting the individual. It may not necessarily benefit the species, but it does benefit the genes and that gene pool in the future. So again, these are some of the misconceptions that we often see about evolution. Now, let's return for just a few moments as we, wrap this up to talk just a little bit about evolutionary psychology, and indeed what some people also refer to as sociobiology. Trying to understand functional explanations in terms of how our behavior evolved. And what it assumes, what the field of evolutionary psychology assumes is that there's a survival advantage that occurs as a consequence of natural selection. That there are some behaviors that are so important that they are ones that are selected for as a consequence of natural selection. They're providing this really important survival advantage. To give you some examples, it's very important that we have a good peripheral vision. It's very important that our sleep mechanisms are intact. that are eating habits, that are temperature regulation, for example. I mean, these are all things, these are all behaviors that have been selected for, have arisen through natural selection, and indeed they provide a tremendous survival advantage for us. Let me give you an example of this. By taking a look at what ordinarily happens in some mammalian species, and this is just one of them, when you take a look at elephant seals, you take a look at the bull, the male. Elephant seals constantly challenge one another in the case of their social hierarchy. And dominant bulls, the ones that are most aggressive, the ones that win most of the competitions with other males in their particular habitat, in their social hierarchy, those are the males that typically are going to copulate more frequently. They are the ones that are going to have the most access to females. Much more access than elephant seals, bull elephant seals that are lower in the dominance hierarchy. So you can see that this advantage then has been conferred to them by way of this behavior that's been selected for, this aggressive behavior that has been selected for. It gives them a reproductive advantage. It allows them to do more matings. And indeed, if you take a look at this figure that you see here, this is the percentage of total observed matings, copulations, in the case of this study that was exploring elephant seals in a particular population. And you can see this is the rank now of these bulls. And you can see that the highest ranking male is the one that does a lot of the mating. And the second ranking male also does a lot of the mating. But between the two of them, and indeed, certainly in the case of the most dominant animal, he's doing roughly, a third of all of the matings occur as a consequence, copulations as a consequence of this male. So it is conferring a reproductive advantage. It's important to ask some other questions here, as we kind of close out this topic. Does natural selection work for all behaviors? That's a fascinating question, and I think that some behaviors are certainly, it's more debatable as to whether or not there's an influence of natural selection. One very interesting example, one that has been much discussed as well as researched, is this whole idea of lifespan length being a behavior that has been subject to natural selection. In other words, has the human species been pre-programmed, for example, to deteriorate, so that we, as the older population, they're taking up resources, and indeed you don't want them to be competing with their children and their grandchildren for those scarce resources. Again, go back and take a look at Darwinian evolutionary theory and the importance of competition. And competition is inevitable. Well, what are we competing for? We're competing for resources. We are competing for scarce resources. Maybe human life is programmed in such a way that the length of our life is something that is under genetic control, that has been programmed and indeed pushes older individuals out of the way, so that we're not in competition, okay, with our offspring and with our grandchildren. It's a very interesting hypothesis. One that I'm not sure that we really have any kind of concrete information on at all. Take a look at gender differences in sexual promiscuity. Males can have many, many children. They can impregnate many women, but a woman simply doesn't have that same kind of opportunity can't multiply her children by having more sexual partners, at least not as dramatically anyway as a male can. So there's been some speculation that this is a behavior that has been selected for, this sexual promiscuity that we see on the part of males. So again, it's a very interesting possibility. Do we have any hard evidence of it? I'm not so sure that we do. But it's interesting to speculate that this is something that that has been selected for, that is something that has been subject to natural selection. Here's another interesting behavior that behavioral neuroscientists have been interested in terms of understanding the contribution of natural selection. Altruistic behavior, that is, how much you help out others, for example, even though you don't directly benefit from it at all. For example, when you give to a charity, maybe you give of your time, you give maybe some money to a charity that you really believe in. We call that altruistic behavior. It's an action that benefits someone, but it doesn't benefit you. Is this a behavior that has been selected for, altruistic behavior? You know, there's some interesting work that has been done with lower animals that suggests that they too are altruistic in some ways, and certainly human beings are. But again, it's interesting to speculate on this. So again, this brings us to a close to this particular area, and you know, we'll be moving on now. We're going to be talking about we're going to diverge a little bit. We're going to be talking about the utilization of animals in research, something that we really feel obligated to talk about in the field of behavioral neuroscience. So that will be the topic of our next lecture.